Hey guys, if you're looking for help with your Amazon business in terms of troubleshooting or strategy, visit sellersessions.com/consultancy or drop me a message to danny@sellersessions.com. Hey guys, welcome back to Seller Sessions. Today I'll bring in Chris McCabe. Hey Chris, how you doing?
Hey Danny, how you doing?
Yep, good. So today we're going to be talking about suspension escalations, and this is quite prominent now because we've got Q4 just around the corner. So you've had a rattling couple of weeks, haven't you, with this? Do you want to unload onto the audience?
People are getting final worded a lot earlier in the process.
So back up there, final worded.
Final worded is we're not going to talk to you anymore. We've given you enough of a chance, which admittedly Amazon sends that message earlier in the process than they used to, but they seem to mean it more now than they did in the past. That's one key takeaway I've had from the past 2-3 weeks.
Yeah, so let's unravel that. So what would you say is the root causes for this kind of thing happening? Obviously, Amazon is speeding this up now. They're giving you less of a chance. So you haven't got your 9 cat lives. It's been reduced.
Right. Less of a window. You're not going to be hearing from as many people about, I emailed seller performance 6 times or 9 times, or I wrote to Jeff 4 times, and the third time or the fourth time was a charm. You're not going to be hearing that as much. They're trying to cut these conversations off sooner for a variety of their own reasons. They've got overflowing email queues way before the peak holiday, number one.
Yeah.
And number two, they're just, it's sort of the lack of training, lack of investigative auditing, the usual stuff, but it's at a,
okay,
higher level now. So
obviously you can't share details of the clients and stuff, but give the kind of case study, what you've been seeing with clients that you can obviously speak about, like observations, what's been happening with these.
And it could be multiple things. It could be that your POA is sort of okay, but they just send you a generic message saying we need more information, and they don't indicate if it's your documentation, your invoices, if they wanted to look at those. Obviously, I do a lot of inauthentic suspensions, right? So invoices, supply chain, is your supplier verifiable? They're not as good at being clear. Maybe they were never that clear, whether or not it's the documentation or the plan of action itself. But often it's the plan of action, because I think we're at the point now where there are a lot of these template services. There's a lot of information out there, and the perception is you can publicly scrape together what you need for a POA and write your own, and nobody seems to be saying that you really can't make it that long, which I thought was a basic point and a hurdle we cleared a couple of years ago or last year maybe. But I'm still seeing, whether people do it themselves or they hire out, I'm still seeing stuff that's miles and miles long, really repetitive. I guess my first words of advice are, don't get redundant. I mean, chop it back, condense it, keep it to tight bullets, not to the point where you're not saying anything specific, but obviously use your judgment, because if you keep throwing the same words in there over and over, trying to hit some buzzwords as if an automated tool is running through your plan of action, like people always say about a CV or a resume, then you're not going to get read, and they'll pull the plug really early on. They're not going to read a 2-page document if they think your root causes are weak, or you're heading off in the wrong direction, or you're just spamming them with content. Yeah.
So no War and Peace, keep it to a 1-pager if possible. Obviously, in some cases, it's difficult if you've got to have additional attachments. But the overall consensus is keeping it tight and concise.
It depends on the type of suspension. I mean, sometimes with like review manipulation, we'll have some of the reviews you're giving Amazon to delete in the POA itself.
Gotcha.
If they're numerous, then yes, you have to attach it. You can't make it pages and pages. And if they want supplier information, if they refuse to look at your invoices and actually look at the supplier, and if they haven't contacted the supplier directly, sometimes we put it in the plan of action itself, and that of course makes it lengthier, because you're adding an email address, a name, title, physical address, phone number, and all that sort of stuff. But the plan of action itself and the root causes section itself shouldn't be miles and miles long.
Yeah. I mean, we we talk about the invoices, a couple of years ago, I had a problem that I never got a product reinstated. I was a novice there, and I basically weren't getting an answer back because the invoices weren't able to be structured how Amazon would like them. Yeah. And obviously we were tying them in. The ideal thing was to tie them in with your orders going into Amazon, like with the, what's the word I'm looking for? When you're raising a shipment. So you've got the volume of the shipment going in. And I think I explained to you, and we've mentioned it on the show before, that when you're ordering en masse and you're buying it for different territories like the UK and US, the numbers that they appear on the same invoice, just they get diverted off on the shipments. So then numbers are never going to match. And that's some of the problems that you have when you can't have that communication as well with the team, because it's like, need more info. And if you're the manufacturer and the owner of the product and they're looking for a set of invoices which match your brand registry product name, that becomes an issue as well, because you're actually manufacturing in a third-party factory, So.
Yeah, I'm working. I mean, there's not a lot I can say about this. I'm working a bit behind the scenes to just get them to say, in some of these messages, get them to modify them. This has been a tug of war for years, but throw some information, just copy and paste it if you have to do it quickly, what the missing information is.
Yeah.
And they're better at telling you if it's a missing invoice or giving you the ASINs, sometimes not that great at telling you, but usually they're better at that than, my God, what's missing from the plan of action? Yeah. Give us a couple of sentences or even just a few words. But why is it so difficult to just, instead of saying we need more information, which could mean anything under the sun, clarifying that, not to the point where you're giving away the farm. Amazon's hugely afraid that they're going to do all your homework for you and you're going to parrot back to them what they told you they needed. That's why they're so vague about this stuff.
Yeah. Well, because they want you to understand. From my understanding, they want you to understand that you know exactly what is wrong.
Yeah.
Because if you don't understand what's going on or you're in denial, then why should they put your account back in good standing or reevaluate whether they let you sell the ASIN anymore?
Right. They're afraid that you'll tell them only what they want to hear, and it won't be what's going on behind the scenes, and they'll reinstate you, and then there's more problems. That's their biggest fear because it impacts their metrics and obviously buyer experience and a lot of other things.
Yeah.
But this is kind of the tug of war that I'm in the middle of now, which is put something in there that says what's missing from the plan, because your plan could be 75% of the way there, and you've just got to brush up the last 25. You've got people who think they're close to being reinstated, and I look at the plan and they're way off. Yeah. So there's this huge misunderstanding. A lot of that's just correspondence and communication, right? Bad on both sides in those cases.
Yeah.
But when you're reading tea leaves and mind reading, it doesn't help anybody. Sellers, buyers, Amazon, it's not doing anyone any favors. So that's kind of the drum I've been beating in the background. But at this point, Q4, long story short, don't wing it. And if you get to a point of escalation, I mean, if they've pushed back a few times, make sure you know how to escalate, and you make sure you have something quality to escalate with, a plan of action that's 90 to 100% unimpeachable, so that you know when you start agitating, not just writing to Jeff saying, here's my POA, nobody read it, get me back on the site.
Yeah. So let's define what an escalation is. Obviously, we understand in general terms what escalation is, but to Amazon, an escalation is basically when you're getting no joy with either sending in your plan of action and getting no response, or you're getting blank responses coming back, i.e. we need more information. Right. Therefore, people drop the Jeff bombs, is what you're saying.
Yeah. You're way more likely not to get an answer now than I would say a month or two ago, which is significant. So there's different kinds of escalations. Some of them are kind of a hybrid in that you're not getting a response. Well, are you not getting a response because they lost your contact in their new tools? They've got fairly new tools that they're still learning.
Yeah.
Sometimes they see the email body, the plan of action itself or the appeal, and they're missing your attachments, or they have to go hunting for them.
Yeah.
But the attachments might be key to your reinstatement. So that's just a non-response or a denial or more information. So there are escalations for just answer me, review it, give me an update, tell me what's missing, etc. And then there are escalations of, well, you're not talking to me anymore because you haven't properly reviewed my plan of action. You've sent me the same email 4 times, and I'm sick of that. We're not getting anywhere. I have to have another team read this document because this document's worthwhile and should get me back on the site. We didn't used to have to do as many of the, why haven't you responded? It's been several days. Why aren't you talking to me? It was more of the, why are you asking me for more information, or why did you send me a general denial? I would say in my world in the last couple of months, the general denials and the non-response, those are up 6, 7, 8 times what they were a few months ago, which is alarming heading into Q4 because that's when the queues really fill up, right?
Yeah. And so what is the most common things you're seeing at the moment in terms of on the subjects that you're escalating? Is it the one which is requiring invoices? Like some are straightforward, aren't they?
The invoice ones will always be there. Inauthentic complaints, I mean, until they decide to totally change that complaint category and not evaluate every item condition or item complaint as quote unquote inauthentic, not just, fake and counterfeit is what we interpret inauthentic to be. They're interpreting it in a lot of different ways. Until that day comes, maybe in 2019 or 2020, they're going to be asking for invoices, supplier information. For some reason, I still see a lot of sellers who are buying from people who don't have websites, don't even have invoices at all, like, especially drop shippers. If Amazon prompts you for documentation before you sell something and you say, I don't have it, I'm a drop shipper, that's suicide. You can't list and sell stuff on Amazon without documentation. And if your documentation is over a year old, if it's hard to read, if your supplier doesn't have a website or the information on the invoice doesn't match anything you have in Seller Central, that too is suicide. They're not like suffering those fools anymore. If they think they can skip over you because you don't have adequate documentation, they're just going to throw it away.
Yeah.
So, or you can come back and say, I've totally changed my business model. Now I buy from suppliers with websites. I'm not selling those ASINs anymore. I will never send you an invoice again that's over a year old. Yes, you can open up a dialogue by showing them that you've got totally new supply chain with better documentation. That's the way to approach it.
Yeah. So what would you say with regards to once it hits that stage of escalation, like if you're going to give it a rating out of 100, like a percentage, what would you say the chance of reinstatement once you get to the stage of escalation?
If it's done properly, your odds are still pretty good.
Yeah.
Obviously it depends on how many times, if you've been spamming them to the point where they final worded you and they put DR on the account, which is don't respond, then they really mean the final word.
Yeah.
If you don't have, and that's in a minimum of cases, fortunately. So most escalations will get a reply. The problem is a lot more people are much more seeing much more often the general denial from a Jeff email, and they're expecting magic from Jeff, and you don't necessarily get it. So you might have to come up with something really good to get their attention back if you wrote to Jeff too soon with a poor POA. So of course, in those cases, your escalation has, 20, 30, 40% chance of success. Because you might have to make more than one run at the Jeff email.
Do you think in most cases now, because it's so, what's the word for it? It's just so universal now. Everyone jumps on, email Jeff.
Yeah.
Do you think it's the returns are diminishing? They've just had enough now, and that they're more flippant with whether they reinstate or not because they're sick of seeing them. And the easiest thing to do when you're managing an inbox as busy as that one is just to dump stuff that you deem not important, but is the world to everyone else.
Well, I mean, there are different inboxes in terms of the Jeff emails. He has multiple assistants who divide those up. I mean, some of them are buyer contacts, right?
Yeah.
In the old days, it was a mixture, but there weren't as many seller contacts, so those were easier to sort into the seller pile. But now within seller problems, there are several different categories in terms of your account suspended, your ASIN suspended, you're reporting abuse by a competitor. So they're drowning in those, and there are way more contacts to the point where it's just a regular email queue. Well, what does that mean? It means that investigators aren't necessarily senior level who are looking at those escalations. And then you have to find different escalation paths. Obviously, there are some we use that we don't want to advertise because we don't want that to become another Jeff at email queue. And drowning in spam contacts. I mean, there are some email queues I found out about in 2015 or 2016. As far as I know, we were the only ones using those. So we got answers within a couple of hours. Word got out to send a POA there, and now everyone uses them. And now they have the same response time as any other queue.
Right.
So with escalations, there's the Jeff one that everyone knows about. But I recommend that people try to escalate by asking for a manager level review at least once within the team that suspended you.
Yeah.
And pushing that and putting it in the subject line, doing it in a nuanced way where you've got a revised plan of action, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So why don't we do this before we wrap? Let's give a quick top down of just what we've been discussing. So with the stage of escalation, obviously it's going to reduce. So ensure that the plan of action is very detailed. Keep emotion out of it. Keep it nice and short.
Not repetitive.
Non-repetitive. And of course, like when you're talking about like your causes and your responses to what you're going to do, I always found that if it is related to this, whether it's a product defect or whatever it is, that it shows really good faith if you are removing the product for inspection. It sends a signal to Amazon that you are serious about this. Because I think a lot of people skip that stage, don't they?
They do. They don't put removal orders in the POA. They don't actually delete the listings. They leave them in Seller Central. A lot of people fail to delete. I'm not sure why, if you've decided never to sell something again. If an investigator goes into Seller Central and you still have all those listings in there, they just deny the appeal.
Yeah.
If you say you're going to avoid selling those again, then you haven't deleted the listings. They can just auto-reject that.
Yeah.
And
so
then,
let's be clear. You're talking about actually deleting the listing on your end, not closing the listing, but deleting the listing.
Yeah, not deactivating, deleting it.
Okay.
And a lot of people are still using this format that Amazon. I understand Amazon gives it to you, or Account Health Services might encourage you to use it, but it makes the POA really long, and the people advising you to do this and support or in Account Health Services aren't the same people necessarily who are reading the appeal and making the decision. Yeah. And that's the reasons, causes of the complaints, A, B, steps you took to resolve the complaints, and C, steps you've undertaken to make sure that this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
That's not the format I use. A lot of sellers are using that because they're encouraged to by either other consultants or Amazon. They tend to have a lot of repetitive information in parts B and C when they're prompted to use that format. So I dissuade people from doing that. They tend to send the same things over and over. Seller Performance reads the same content in B and C. They think you're just repeating yourself to fill it up and to just tick the boxes, and they start rejecting it because they're not getting the content they need. So I have two sections, root causes and then plan of action, A and B.
Yeah, and so obviously if people are finding these letters online, the other thing that Amazon will see is it becomes a template and it looks like you've just copied and changed a few of the elements to these teams.
Yeah.
So there's one thing to copy the structure, which is deemed to be right, but then if you're taking wholesale content and only just tweaking the bullet points to your needs, they're smart enough to see this. So that won't help your case either because it doesn't look like you've done your due diligence.
Right.
Yeah.
It looks like you're filling in the blanks.
Yeah.
When they give you guidance or suggestions on, hey, did your suspension come from shipping reasons, sourcing problems, listing problems? They're giving you suggestions, and a lot of sellers are just taking those potential categories of complaints and writing something next to each one as if all of those things were the reason they were suspended.
Gotcha.
I mean, it's confusing. It's misleading, and I don't agree with what Amazon's doing. I understand why sellers are making that mistake, but it is a mistake to do it that way.
Cool. Yeah. Well, look, let's wrap that there. How can people reach you?
Yeah, so especially with Q4, time is of the essence. Email me directly at chris@ecommercechris.com, and then there's a lot of information on the eCommerce Chris website in terms of what different services we have and how we can help you quickly with different kinds of problems.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, guys, thank you for joining us today. Chris, thanks for joining us. If this is your first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. I'll see you again in a few days. Take care.